All right. We have Eric Anderson returning to grace this beautiful show again. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very well, Dr. Bach. Thank you for having me. Congratulations on your recent graduation.
Thank you very much. It's been a journey, and I'm so blessed to have learned everything I've learned and to have met the people I met. And I look forward to sharing the healing power of nature with people. So today we're talking about the things that interest us most, which are Eastern philosophy, yoga, the meaning of life, all these things that both of us love to talk about, because where we actually met each other was in the philosophy program at Stony Brook in New York. And we had a great teacher, Nicholson, where we met each other. So would you care to tell a little bit about that story of how you got into the Eastern philosophies and how we kind of clicked, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so who knew that I would find you at the end of that rainbow pot of gold there with yoga and all that. So I'm excited to talk about this because it's such a beautiful story. So Stony Brook University, all right. Luckily, we had an amazing professor there, Professor Andrew Nicholson. I will shamelessly support him here and name drop him. He's fantastic. He's got some lectures online that you should go check out. Just like one of the wisest people to know about Indian philosophy and Indian politics as well. Just he really opened as opened the eyes of Westerners to this philosophy. Him himself being a Westerner. So I think that he had a unique experience where he went to India as an outsider and had to learn Sanskrit. I know you took his Sanskrit course.
That's fantastic. I took that was a really interesting class. So it was I think it was like 2 semesters, and he had us drawing out the Sanskrit letters, and I think we were translating the Mahabharata, like a Indian classic. So there was a lot of interesting wisdom from within while we were translating. What I found really interesting about that Sanskrit course is how many of the words corresponded to the Slavic languages. So I was born in Ukraine, and I know a little bit of Russian. Obviously, I know Ukrainian. And a lot of the words were exactly the same. And there's this theory that there was this original civilization, the Indo-European civilization that preceded India and Europe and everything. And they actually all spoke the same language and kind of spread across the world. But when I saw the words, I was like, that actually seems to be true. These are the exact same words that we use for a language that's not even, close geographically.
Well, yeah, the Indo-European spread. I mean, so, Slavic comes from the Greek as well, and then you get it from the Indo-European. So, yeah, there are many words that you can find. And I think that was the beauty of his class, is that he allowed you to understand the esoteric things behind the surface of what he was teaching. And let's be real here. What he was teaching was not easy or something that's privy to the Western mind. These are many things that, my parents didn't tell me about this stuff when I was growing up. You're writing down stuff in the Mahabharata, which is where the Bhagavad Gita comes from. One of the most famous texts that Westerners know from India. He opened us up to a world and a worldview that influences us to this day. And there's no doubt that he had a massive impact. I can speak for myself, but I know we talk about this all the time, just a life-changing impact in many ways on the way that a Western mind can learn from the East. As a philosophy teacher, and he was a teacher of Asian philosophies, so you could learn about Buddhism from him or Hinduism. Primarily, those two he knew the best. But at the end of the day, you could learn anything from that man. He could always have a good foray into politics now and then and teach you a little thing or two about just the perspectives and the way that, the West views the East and the differences in mindsets. He'd like to talk about Carl Jung every now and then as well, which we do. So, if it wasn't for Nicholson, we wouldn't have, he was the guru that taught us about the ancient mysteries of India, if you will, in a sense of Hinduism and Buddhism. And the reason why I say that, him as the guru is because he often stressed that when you learned about these ancient philosophies, which are pretty much, like religious, spiritual practices, in many ways, you would need to learn them from a guru. That was the true transmission of the teaching, comes through the fact of someone who's learned it from someone else who actually lived it and learned it.
Mm.
And so because he went to India and lived under all these different people throughout his career as a scholar before he became a professor, he was then able to impart that knowledge to us, and it was true, genuine knowledge that we now are able to like tell others. And it's genuine because we got it from a genuine source, like the water, the well sprung from Nicholson has now given us, very fertile fields of philosophy, especially Eastern philosophy, to utilize for the rest of our lives, if you don't mind me drawing that image there.
Yeah, it's true. One thing I find fascinating and inspiring about his example is I always remember coming to his office hours, and he was he was really trying to be a true teacher. He was really trying to express that which he found to be interesting, what he was passionate about, and trying to convey this truth. But he was always kind of hampered down by the academic system. Like I always remember him talking about like, oh, they're making me write like research articles and they're making me write this and that. He always seemed really stressed. But then like in class, he was so uplifting. So you as a teacher, as a history teacher, do you ever experience anything like that where you're trying to express, what moves you, what you think could really be helpful to other people, but then the kind of systemic weight pushes down on you and makes it a struggle?
And thankfully, I could have said no before the lockdown because I was given a lot of freedom at the school I was at, and I felt very free. But obviously now with the changes in the way that conventional teaching is looking for the foreseeable future, I do feel that in a different way. I'm not expected to write these stressful academic articles, but at the same time, I've lost that connection. And so Nicholson was a true teacher because he wasn't just preaching. He wanted to engage you and bring you into what he was, his knowledge. He wanted you to be a part of it and add to it. And so I know he, advised you well with your going to naturopathic school. And he did the same for me. He said, honestly, you're better off being a teacher in a high school setting, a secondary setting, because in college, you're so limited. And he said a lot of professors in college, they don't know how to teach. They don't care to learn how to teach. It's just, I have to, like you said, write your research articles, write your theses,
Well, that's the strange
put out your books.
College professors, they don't go through any education on how to teach to some degree, or they do within their programs.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's something, but he made it seem like that's not the primary thing that you're learning. And he said what you're going to do is it's so much more impactful because you're actually teaching kids who are still younger than college. And that's how I always felt. The idea of being a college professor is nice and all, and I could wear my little patches on my elbows and whatnot. But like, come on, it's once again, it's a superficial way of feeling good about yourself. And obviously you can impact people at a college level. I'm not trying to diss professors here. They have majorly impactful roles on cultivating the real professionals of our day. I'm teaching history to a bunch of kids who might not ever think about it again after they leave high school, right? So I'm not trying to argue that professors aren't doing anything of worth, but the idea of making the connection when you're teaching, and that's what we realized with Nicholson, is that he was at his best when he was doing that. And I think all humans are at their best when we're physically engaged with each other and really looking each other in the eyes and being honest about our experiences and really, having the genuine passion to teach and share wisdom with people or stories, and you learn from stories. So if you can be a good storyteller, you're going to be a decent teacher as long as you know when to stop rambling.
Yeah. there's an art to it. Some teachers, they just kind of like look down at their notes or at their PowerPoint slides. Maybe they're being asked to teach and they didn't really want to do that. Maybe they wanted to do research. That was my experience in a lot of the science courses when I went to school, that it was a lot of people who were into research. They were doing that, but they didn't really want to teach. They were kind of placed in that position where they felt like they were forced to. And that goes to say that like the people who are most inspiring tend to be the people who want to be in the place where they are, right? Like they want to express something or they want to create this. So let's get into yoga. I know you are a person who practices yoga daily, and you found great benefit in it. And I wanted to talk today about the underlying philosophies behind yoga. Because as we were talking about, yoga in a lot of cases is thought of as this physical thing, like a physical exercise. What are the spiritual foundations of yoga?
Excellent question. That is what we will unpack today. So let me start with the physical aspects of yoga, because that's really what keeps me in it, like no matter what. And that's an important thing to remember, because we want to be grounded in our physical bodies. So the physical aspects of yoga, what brought me to yoga, okay, was the need for a physical practice. With, I had tried Tai Chi, working out, running, all fine, but it never really did it for me, because I think what was lacking in those other things, maybe not that I wouldn't do Tai Chi now, it wasn't something that I could do on my own. I needed teachers for this. So I committed to yoga at some point. I would go to classes, and I saw that it led to positive effects on my physical well-being. And then as time went on, I noticed that the mental and spiritual effects, if you will, also came about. Now, I was obviously pursuing those at the same time, but I feel like once I really honed the physical skills of it and got that reward, that's when the true rewards of like the things that you don't see came about. Like the fruits really were delivered then. So yeah, I digress. So yoga, let's start with the roots of yoga. Okay. What does it mean? So there's a Sanskrit term, yuj, okay, which means to yoke, or to just like, to tether yourself to something, or kind of bring yourself together in a sense. So I just taught this to my students at the end of the year, and I had to teach it through distance learning, which is not easy. So I did the best I could to make it simple. So, it's trying to basically gather the various parts of who you are and bring them together, and to unify them. That's what yoga means. If you look at what it means to unify, to yoke, to bring as one, that's kind of what it means deep down. So if you think about it esoterically that way, or you just try to think of it abstractly, right? Oh, yoga is this is my goal, is to do this. Okay. You realize that maybe you can't just achieve that goal through the physical practice. Not that you can't make progress on that goal in your physical practice, but that there might be other parts of daily life that are necessary to really fulfill the goal of yoga. And that's where the philosophical elements come in. So I guess I'll just go through the main ones that are listed in the Bhagavad Gita. And
what are the different types of yoga? So yoga is a path. It's not just the asanas, the physical postures, but it's different ways of living that unite you to yourself, the divine. And there's many different routes, as we'll talk about. And it's interesting too that these different paths of yoga are for different people at different times. That there's not necessarily like one right way to do it. There's many ways. And also touching on the fact that yoga, or that word yuj meaning union, it really brings yoga into this idea of holistic healing. Because the word holistic comes from whole. It comes from making things whole. Even the word heal comes from an English word meaning whole. So this idea is present in humanity since as early as we can read. This idea that something is not right with us mentally, spiritually, physically, and the answer to this is to unite ourselves with ourselves, or with the divine, or with our environment.
Right, with everything if you can. And I think that's important to realize, is that this is self-realization. This is self-actualization, because we are inherently whole. The Buddha nature is within, all right? Or Atman is within, if you want to look at it from a Buddhist or a Hindu perspective, respectively, that's there. And that's something that's what the goal of yoga is essentially to remember that unity. And those different paths that you take at different points of your life, guess where they all lead? Right to you. All right, so that's the idea. So yeah, the main three types of yoga, philosophic paths of yoga that are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, and they are, some of them are much older than that. They've been practiced for a long time. The Bhagavad Gita just helps identify them for us, and the main character and the other main character who are really together, Arjuna and Krishna, Krishna being the god and Arjuna being the representation of the physical human. They talk about this and what they each are. So I guess we'll start with karma yoga, because that's probably the most important one to break down and easy enough. And I kind of like the way that you broke down karma yoga. We were talking about it earlier. So if you don't mind, I'll let you take this one.
Sure. Yeah. So karma yoga is a certain path of yoga, and karma in Sanskrit means like action or to do. So this is the path of the doer. It's kind of more of the warrior path. And what's really interesting about it, what we were talking about, is that a lot of mythology focuses on this aspect of realization. It focuses on actions of heroes in the world, actions of gods in the world. How do they act rightly? How do they act in a way that's in accordance with their spirit? How does one find fulfilling meaning within their lives through how they act in the world? This is the path of karma yoga. This idea of karma yoga is present in basically every religion, right? As a part of it. Like in Christianity, it's love your neighbor, turn the other cheek, do good deeds. Faith without good works is hollow. This is karma yoga. Karma yoga is enlightenment or spiritual realization is not really valuable unless it's applied and it's made to benefit others. So the path of karma yoga is the path of doing good things to bring good into the world and also bring good to yourself. And as anyone has experienced, when you do something truly good or with a good intention, it makes you feel like amazing. It makes you feel great when you do just a random act of kindness and you don't really think about it. It makes you feel great. And it's such a shame that that's not stressed as the important things of what make a person happy when they are. Sometimes, just like writing a little note to somebody or giving them a present or doing something unexpected because you're just like, oh, I just want to see them smile, want to make them, happier, want to express my love. Those kind of things bring you into that state of love and they bring you into that state of union, because to do those things, you have to be it. There's no way to like fake a good act of kindness. Like you'll know if you're faking it. You'll know if you're trying to seek something from it. And that's the path of karma yoga. It's the way of union with the divine through action and how you behave in the world.
That was beautiful, Bogdan. I couldn't have said it any better myself. And I think you actually, tied into the next type of yoga in a way when you're talking about compassion and love. But I think, and that's what makes, it takes you to the path of bhakti, which will be the next one that we talk
devotion.
about. Right. But what takes you there, if you think about it, okay, is the fact that you're not attached to the fruits of your actions. That's what Krishna says to Arjuna, is that you can practice karma yoga, but if you're attached to the fruits of your actions, like you are doing this because you really want the consequences of your action, it's not that you're not doing the right thing or won't get good karma, but you're accruing attachment to your deeds, and even that ultimately will create a sense of ego, which in that particular philosophy is not something you're trying to do. You're trying to do these selfless acts. And you mentioned a bunch of selfless acts in your examples that you gave. And I think that, I think we all wish that we act selflessly. We all want to. But at the end of the day, it's hard to deny that we are beings that act in our own self-interest. So I think that's the path of the karma yogi, which is a path that we walk our entire lives, is to try to figure out, okay, like, how can I balance my desires and still not infringe upon the rights of others? Or just their well-being or their, because sometimes there's a tough decision to make when you have to tell someone, let's say, a serious truth about what they're doing. Maybe it's not good for them, but you feel deep down that like you're doing it because you want them to be better for themselves. What if that person doesn't think that there's anything wrong with them, right? And then are you doing something wrong because you think that you're trying to like help them be better, but then they're like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. Why do you think that's wrong?
And that's the teaching of the karma yoga. And I love that you brought up that point, because I think that's the key thing of it is there's a saying in the Bhagavad Gita you have a right to your actions, but not to the fruits of your actions, which seems kind of esoteric. What does this mean? I think it's talking about a psychological point. It's talking about if you act with certain expectations, you lose real engagement with the moment of action and truly acting in a way that's good. For example, if you're doing a good deed because you're expecting something good to happen, it's still a good deed, but it won't bring that energy of love in you, like doing something for no reason and fighting that impulse within yourself to have pure self-interest, because self-interest does exist and it's important. I mean, it's what keeps us alive. It's an important part, but it's not the whole thing. And sometimes the best way to act in that regard, when you were talking about the case of, telling somebody a truth that they don't want to hear, is reflecting on where are you really coming from? Are you coming from a place that you really want to help them? Or maybe there's some element of malice in it too. Maybe there's some element of revenge, or if there isn't, and you do that, then that's the right action, because you can't know what the fruits of the action are. You don't know what's going to come from this seed you plant or this tree, but that's the whole message of karma yoga, is don't focus on the fruit or, what it grows into, but focus on doing the right thing at the right time. And this is incredibly difficult because that could be very dangerous. You never know what's going to happen. This is for positive and negative. It applies to, doing something because you want something good to happen and then, being disappointed because it didn't happen, or doing something that you want to happen and something bad happens and then you're disappointed in yourself, but it really wasn't your fault. Like, you did the right thing, but you can't control the outcome of many things.
Right. So all you can do is act authentically and be prepared for whatever backlash or positive you get. And
Right.
if you're not attached to it, you won't care, or you won't care. I guess you'll be detached and you'll realize that, well, all I have to do is act righteously towards myself. And, I have my moral compass. I have, I believe that my character is always striving to be on the way of the karma yogi. And therefore, whatever I do wrong or right is the perception of an outside, subjective opinion in some ways. I'm not sure. This is where my students now in philosophy club will be like, well, what about murder, Mr. Anderson? They always say that because they're like, why is that subjectively wrong? Like, because that could be subjectively okay. And I'm like, all right, I get it. I can't apply this to every circumstance. But the idea is that if you're acting authentically in the way that you're acting, not to physically harm others, usually, if you really are trying to be a good person and you have a goal to be an upright, upstanding person, a good character, then your actions will speak for themselves and you will, you'll face some backlash, you'll get a lot of praise. And there's never been a person who's ever been authentic that wasn't controversial in some way, right? Because if you're always trying to do the right thing by people, you could become a people pleaser. And if you always try to do things for yourself, then you become a narcissist, right? So there's a balance in there where you got to have a healthy individuality and make decisions for yourself, but also, realize that you're living with other people in this world, and
there's
they
a really
have judgments.
Interesting insight from within the Bhagavad Gita related to what you just said. Your students tell you about murder, because right in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, this archer, and Krishna is this god who's driving the chariot, because the story of the Bhagavad Gita is the story of a great war that happens in India.
Mahabharata.
The Mahabharata.
The one you were writing about in Sanskrit class.
Exactly. The kind of great war. And what was really problematic about this war is that it was essentially families fighting families. It was kind of like a civil war. It was, there was factions all over the world that were previously united, even family members like cousins and uncles who were literally meeting on the battlefield to fight in this ancient war that I guess hasn't been pinned down like in an exact location or anything like that I'm aware of. But
that'll be another podcast, Bob.
Yeah.
We talk about where that was in like 3300 BC.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. Because the people writing it were talking about an ancient war, and this text is already ancient itself. So
right.
But anyway, in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, who's ready to go into this battlefield, the archer, and Krishna, this kind of godhead leading this chariot, he's asking Krishna, do I really have to do this? Do I really have to slay my kinsman? Do I really have to? That's my uncle over there. Like, And Krishna gives him a really interesting answer, which I think could be applied metaphorically, but also literally in some senses. And kind of what he advises him is that, like, essentially this war is one to stop evil. This is a just war. That these people came and they did this and that, and this is actually how you protect people. This is actually how you maintain the peace and the safety of the kingdom. And it's terrible that it has to come to this, but sometimes it does. And he also gives them the insight that it's not you who's doing anything. You're simply an actor in a process that's like way beyond you, and this is your place, is to do this thing. And it's kind of like this justification for war and violence. On the other hand, though, there's a metaphorical aspect, which I've heard from, what was his name? Swami Sachananda?
Vivekananda?
No. I forget his exact name. He wrote it was a book about like the yogi's path. I forget it.
Shivananda. I think I'm saying his name a little bit wrong.
I think that's the one. Yeah, I think that's the one. Anyway,
okay.
he brings out the point that on the literal surface, it seems like this is a justification for war and violence. But what he's saying is that the whole Bhagavad Gita is a metaphor. All these, enemies are your own mind and your own spirit, the negative aspects of it. So when Krishna tells Arjuna, no, like you must fight, and Arjuna's like, but I don't want to kill my own, people. It's really talking about, I don't want to kill my own like negative thoughts or my beliefs or the things that I hold true that I am afraid without. And all these different aspects of the mind that we think are our biggest allies, but are actually our enemies to health, to being at peace of minds, attachments, essentially, habits, attachments. They feel like they're us. We don't want to just give them up. We don't want to fight them because they seem like they're who we are. But in this story, no, like that's the war against the negative parts of yourself is a righteous one. It's one that we undertake every time we choose a good action versus a bad action.
Right. And the implication for that in ancient times is obviously very important to understand, because what he argues, Krishna, is that it's your dharma. And everyone in this, dharma means duty, right? Your sacred, spiritual duty. It could be spiritual or it could be a worldly duty. It's however you want to look at it. But the idea is that we each have a role in this life, and it's to fulfill the dharma that we get. And so Krishna, or rather Arjuna, the main character, doesn't want to kill his relatives, but Krishna's saying, like, deep down, you're not really killing anyone. Like, this is all a great game of like the one that is God, and everyone's playing roles, and don't take it to heart that much, because really it's just the moments in time. Personally, I think it's a good argument if you're trying to get people to justify being warriors and like murdering people, because then it's like, all right, well, it's just a part of like being a human being, that this is what we do. Personally, I think we need to value life more than that. But like you said, the story is obviously, it's hitting home on realities of this world, how insane it is that we do kill each other, okay, in order to get our points across. But at the same time, it's definitely up, and it's really more helpful to view it in the symbolic light of, these are parts of ourselves that we are at war with. And yes, like, we need to go to battle with them. We can't just quiver in fear and disengage. There is hard work that we need to do. And that's what karma yoga is that hard work of making those decisions day in and day out in your life, and trying to be, a righteous person with all your faults. You're going to have faults and flaws. That's a given.
This reminds me of a saying in the Daodejing, which relates, I think, exactly to this of fighting these negative qualities. It says that the path of knowledge is adding something every day. The path of wisdom, the path of the way, is letting go of something every day.
I saw you post that the other day, and I was like, oh man, I'm on that path of knowledge, aren't I?
We all are, right? But
Right.
we're on both paths,
Right.
But the idea of this, it's a deep point. It's not exactly obvious to understand what it's pointing to. But for me, what it means is that simplify your life, simplify the complexity, remove that which doesn't bring you happiness, doesn't bring you joy. remove ideas that don't help you. Removing is the path to your true nature. Because as you said, we already are whole. So that means if we really are whole, then the only reason we don't think we're whole is because we've added so many layers of
Yes.
complexity of this is how I was born, this is how I was raised, this person did bad for me, this person did good, this is who I am, this is where I'm going, and all these layers. And the path of the Tao is remove these layers and live and be there. Be there for your life, experience without preconception. But that's really painful. That feels like killing a part of yourself.
Right. Well, you are. It's a
You
part
are.
of yourself that's
It's ego death in
artificial.
a sense.
That right. You've built up in order to live in the world. Then you realize, oh man, I got to shed
And it
a
was a
lot of these
necessary adaptation.
divisions.
That's always a
Absolutely.
good point to make there is like, so, coming in, we both got really deep into Eastern philosophy. We were all about, relinquish the ego and transcend it and these kind of things. But as you go in life, you start seeing like, oh, like what we call the ego or the self, it has like a purpose. Like the persona allows us to fit into society and make a influence on it, to some sense for better, that it has like its own purpose. It's not the greatest goal of life, but it's a vehicle. It's a tool for being a part of the society and having some stability of like, you kind of know who you are and where you're going, because without that, like, you're just in pure chaos, and that's not a good place to spiritual, wisdom. So
Yeah,
it's
you want a spirit, you want an anchor. Definitely want an anchor in life, and you want to know when to pick it up, like you said. So, I think it's good you brought up the Daodejing and the idea that, we're constantly balancing. Like you don't want to I like what you said about knowledge versus letting go of the Tao, because you don't want to just hoard knowledge. You can just know a lot of a lot of things, like especially me as a historian, I learn a lot of different things. Some of those things that I know aren't necessarily going to be conducive to me living a better life. They could be interesting to talk about, but if I need to learn something about, let's say, like how to fix something in my home, that's a much more conducive knowledge to an immediate thing I need to address than it would be to like learn about Lord Cochrane's naval journeys around the world in like the early 19th century Britain and during the Napoleonic Wars. It's interesting to me in one sense, but I don't know how useful that knowledge will be unless I start sailing around the world in the 19th century, early 19th century British empire, right? It's important to be able to filter. Now you might be thinking, but weren't you just talking about how filters are what we build up and we have all these blocks to like taking in the way things are, in a purity without an ego? Yes, but you still need what those filters, if like they're who you are. Like your personality is almost like a response to the world as it is, and so you're trying to mold it and trying to make it so that, like you said, you can impact people in this world and actually be able to transmit to them and make a connection with them and like have some sort of coherent message. Because if you don't have a sense of self, you're not going to necessarily have a coherent message, because you're just going to be fleeting every moment, which maybe for some people that's their dharma. Maybe for some people in this life they need to totally relinquish any sense of identity. It's very possible that that's
Mm.
their highest soul achievement, let's say, or whatever, just to even live a healthy life, to not stress out.
Mm.
Everyone's
Can you
different though.
can you touch on this idea of dharma as opposed to karma?
Yeah, so that's great to bring up, because that's what the kids always get confused too, because they sound so similar. So karma is the actions; those are more like your accrued, the things that you accrue over time because you're making actions in the world. So your dharma is like, it's like your long-term goal or what you feel you need to do. It's like definitely more of more of a consciousness or spiritual focus.
Mhm.
And then your karma is more like your physical actions that you take. And then your karma, or whatever karma you accrue, could lead to whether or not your dharma has been fulfilled or not. So if your dharma is to, you might have a dharma in a life that you're born into this life, and you might be born into like have a pretty bad life and do bad things for whatever reason. That was your dharma. And maybe for whatever reason the people in your life that raised you were able to change that, and then all of a sudden you end up living a good life, where your karma ends up, the karmic actions that you take end up altering what your supposed dharma would have been. So like dharma is in a sense like a string that pulls you through life, and then your karma is like how much you tug on that string, if you
Mm,
will, in what
mm,
direction. And sometimes it's better not to fight the string and to just follow where it
mm.
goes, depending on what kind of life you're living. And other times maybe you really have to, or think about a fish like getting stuck on the hook. Like, are you going to fight? Are you going to fight? Or are you just going to let them reel you in?
So the
Maybe in one
Dharma
life you
is
got to get
more
reeled in.
like, it's like fate or your mission or
Yes,
your calling. It's kind of, why are you here on this earth? And your karma is your individual actions, for better or worse, that either take you towards it or away from it to some degree.
exactly,
Mm.
exactly.
I think
So
that's a
yeah,
key point to like translate it over into terms that we understand, because I think these ideas, they're deep psychological insights. Like whether or not someone believes in a spiritual being or believes in the impact of, karma, what goes around comes
exactly.
around, they're true in this mysterious psychological sense that we can't explain. So if you do good things as like a way of being, and that's your typical way, like you do good things for people, good things will happen to you because you're influencing your social environment in ways that you can't predict. So like you leave flowers at somebody's house, maybe when you're sick, that person will leave flowers at your house. You can never perceive that this is what will happen. But when you're constantly doing good actions, it's a simple fact of reality that when someone treats you with love and kindness, you feel like you want to do it back to them. Like that's the natural human response. If you feel like somebody, does something hateful towards you, you want to return it. That's human nature, right? So karma, in a sense, like whether or not you believe in the spiritual force that's making it happen, it's at the most basic level, it's the force that, gives you basically the fruits of all your actions that you never see where they're coming from or what is happening. And it could be for better or worse. If you rob, steal, lie, it might be good for a couple of years, but then eventually people will do that to you. Maybe you'll end up in prison. Maybe somebody will, threaten violence on you, or maybe it'll actually happen. And it's because of those actions. Like someone who didn't do those things probably is way less likely to experience those things
Right.
for
You create a
obvious reasons.
psychological, or, you have a mindset, you create a psychological aura around you, you transmit a certain vibe. But, if you keep it simple as that, we're all electromagnetic beings. We're all vibing. It's true. We don't understand emotion psychologically. We've only begun to map consciousness and really have an understanding of what that is. But we know that thought form waves do exist to an extent. We're trying to understand it, right? So that means that everything we feel and think influences the world around us. So obviously, then our actions become much more impactful, because they're not just thoughts or emotions that already influence the field. And this is where we start to get into science, which is great, because then people who don't believe in God, or feel the need to connect with anything spiritually, it's like, okay, well, like you said before, this is just the way that the world works, and this is the way that humans interact in the
Right.
social environment
There's
that we're
psychological and
co-creating.
philosophical insights that whether or not you believe in a god or a deity, they're truths that people discovered.
Right.
Maybe it was from God or a deity, maybe it wasn't. Who knows? But that's what they discovered through their actions. And they wrote it down on paper because they were like, this is my whole life I lived, and this is what I noticed. I noticed that when I acted in a good way, good things happened to me. And I don't know why, really. But there's many explanations, but it almost doesn't even matter, because at the end of the day, you just want like a map for how do you live life in such a way that you are fulfilled and you're happy. I mean, what else is the point of philosophy at the end of the day other
Exactly.
than applying it to actually living a good life?
And that's what these paths of yoga teach us, is the different ways that you learn how to live a good life, or that you walk
Mm,
towards that. The next one we've mentioned a lot already, Bhakti Yoga,
hmm.
which is basically just the path of devotion, the path of like unconditional love, and surrendering to that love. And that could be a love of God or a deity, or a love of another human being that you're devoted to, your mother, your grandmother, your father, your girlfriend, whoever, your teacher, someone who's helping you, your doctor, your nurse. Like, and when you do that, when you see that, and I'm going to take it to this religious aspect here, because it is coming from Hinduism, at least first and foremost, is that when you at least think or see God within everyone, whether it is your doctor, your teacher, even the person that pisses you off on the road, okay, that's when you're practicing some good bhakti yoga. Is when people who you are angry with, and that you don't even know through a hole in the wall, and you are so, so ready to just flip them off or get angry at them. If you can realize and recognize Bhakti Yoga and realize that within them is the spirit of all, or God, or whatever you want to believe, that's when you're really going to practice Bhakti Yoga so well and be able to learn what it means to just have that unconditional love and surrender to that unconditional love of all life, all being, and you don't become frustrated, because the separation that we experience is technically illusory when you get into the grand scheme of the oneness of all under a Hindu, philosophical mindset, or religious mindset, if you will.
I think this is a good place to bring in also, what are the practices that correspond to these different paths of yoga? So for Bhakti Yoga, these include prayer, mindfulness exercises that are based on compassion. So those actually happen to be some of my favorite ones and the most impactful ones that I felt for myself. I tend to be, in terms of Myers-Briggs, in terms of Carl Jung's theory, I tend to be more on the feeling side rather than the thinking side, although it's kind of a little bit balanced. But for people who tend to feel, that's why we get along. We're very fervent feeling philosophers.
Yeah, we think and feel together. It's great. Thinking and feeling overlaps pretty easily for us, which is nice. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing to have.
And for people like that, the kind of meditation or the kind of yoga that helps and comes naturally is the forms of compassion. So in Tibetan Buddhism, there's this practice which involves sitting in a meditation posture, imagining people who are suffering in your life. They might be family members, they might be people you're angry with, anyone you have any charged negative emotion towards. These are the most important people to start with, and then spread out to generally everyone. But to breathe in their suffering, sorrow, and pain, you breathe it in as like a black smoke, which is already like, I don't even know if I want to do that, but that's part of the practice. It's like,
right. You got to overcome the separation.
Exactly.
So you're in the polarity.
You're taking it in, you breathe in that black smoke of, that pain and that anguish and that thickness and that weighing down. You breathe it in, and with compassion in your heart, you imagine like a golden light in your heart area, transmuting this energy and turning this hate and this anger and this frustration, this pain into love. And then you imagine these people, and then you breathe out like this green healing energy back to them. And you do this even for a few repetitions, and you start noticing, first you notice what I said, which is you just don't want to breathe in their bad feeling. Cause that's like the human reaction is like, oh, they're suffering, they're in pain. Like, I don't want to bring that into
That's not my suffering. That's not my pain.
And there's a fear that like that will make me suffer in pain. But what this exercise teaches is you bring it in, you transmute it with love, and you bring out the healing energy. And that's the fundamental attitude of compassion, because compassion, true compassion, arises when you witness the suffering of someone else. You take it in, you allow it to influence you and make you not feel good, because that's what it makes you feel, like you could be that person. But to do something about it, to do something loving, to not like shy away from it. But anyway, this practice is really helpful for any kind of interpersonal issues. If you're angry at someone, or you're having difficulty or arguments, or these are the people to do that with. And then it's so amazing how quickly that love will come and that compassion will come back, and you'll realize, oh, like they acted in this way because, they were hurting. And like you start actually seeing what is the real case. And then you can actually go in there and you can act karma yoga in such a way that it actually brings goodness for both people. So these paths all go together.
Good.
But as far as karma yoga,
now, yes.
Well, let me just say something about it.
Well, let me just say something about Bhakti Yoga with the practices so we can finish that up. Mm-hmm. One, Bhakti Yoga is the path of the empath. Okay. If you're an empathetic person and you feel that, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are, that is what Bhakti Yoga is all about. And like you said, it ties into karma yoga. You end up doing the right thing for people. Another thing that Bhakti yogis are really known for, and which this is where I become a Bhakti yogi, because I'm not as maybe willing to breathe in people's negative emotions unless like I really feel like I can connect with them, because I would worry about like people that I don't know as well. Like, what am I really doing here? If I can really work with someone one-on-one, I'm more than willing to do that if I know I have a strong connection with them and I want to do it. I would be a little more hesitant with others. Maybe I don't know as well, or I don't know if I can trust their energy. That's just me, because I am sensitive to those things.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing, just to bring it in before you continue, is that this practice is particularly from the healing tradition. It's particularly from the area of Tibetan Buddhism, where the medicine Buddha is called upon, and it's kind of the path of the healer in a sense,
He
because that's what you
oversees
do
that.
as a
I see.
healer is
Okay.
you meet, strangers
Right.
and their pain, and you have to practice taking in their pain and helping them. So this is like, it's a specific practice.
Yeah,
Whereas
no.
there's other Bhakti Yoga practices that are not involving breathing and pain. There's a lot in the Buddhist tradition as well, but that's a specific one for the healing paths.
Right. No, for you as a doctor, that's so important. Obviously, you have to be able to have a healthy relationship to that, because otherwise it can drag you down. Right. Bhakti Yoga. So the things that I like to do with it are devotional chanting, mantras, singing, Bhakti Yoga. Okay. It makes you feel good.
Anything
good
that
to
brings
use
the
your
feeling
voice.
up.
Right. Because I see, Virgin Mary above you. I wrote a song over the lockdown called like Panayia Mu, which is just like Holy Mary in Greek. And it was like philaxeme, like watch over me, guard me. All right. And it's like worship songs are great. They really do bring you in the good mindset. It doesn't even matter like what religion you sing it for. It will just put you in a good mood. And that's the science element of it, is you sing and you build the right vibe and it puts you in a good place. You don't need to believe in anything really
That's the
in order to build it
fascinating
up.
thing about it. Have you ever listened to Krishna Das?
Yes.
So I've been to a concert of his.
I remember you talking about this. Yes.
It was so basically what they, it's this tradition of music popular in India called kirtan, which is this devotional singing. So, the person on stage will sing these kind of hymns of praise to, Krishna or this God or that God. And they'll have, somebody playing the, what's the name
Tabla?
for the tabla. Yeah. It's like a Indian drum that has all these different resonances, really nice. Somebody else playing like the sitar and things like that. And then they sing that, and then they stop, and then the audience sings it back to them. So it's this like back and forth and back and forth. But anyway, in this kind of environment, it's so fascinating. And even when you just listen to the kirtans on tape of like the singer and then the crowd singing back and forth these devotional hymns, although you can't understand the words, because I don't speak Sanskrit fluently. I learned a little bit of it, but I know some of the words, but I don't understand really what's being said. You still get in this state of like emotional rapture and this like great feeling. And you can't explain why, because you can't understand the words, but just the feeling that's being transmitted through the voice and being echoed back, and the music, it puts you in this state of love. And I actually heard this case and bliss.
Yeah, let me quickly just say this.
Sure.
If anyone wants an example of what Bogdan's talking about in a conventional song that almost everyone probably knows across the universe, Jai Guru Deva. You hear John Lennon saying that at the end of the song. Whenever I sing that, I get the chills, man. When I sing it for other people, they feel it too. It's just like powerful thing. You don't even need to know what it means, but if it's sung in the right way, it's this devotional, bhakti based. It's going to uplift. It's a very uplifting energy. I just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, that and these traditions happen within Christianity and other religions where there's this singing of songs. This is a key
Hallelujah,
part.
Right? Everyone loves that Jeff Buckley song. It's not necessarily a church song, but it's got that vibe. That's the idea.
Right. It has the potential to elevate your spirit. And who knows why, even when you don't understand the words because they're in Latin or Sanskrit. I actually heard a story that was really interesting, and I totally understand it. So there was this veteran who had PTSD, was very troubled after coming back from a war, and was in constant depression, was drinking, was doing anything to take their minds off of the pain. They felt numb, they felt out of it. And the story goes that Krishna Das, this kirtan singer, was put on for this person, and they had never heard of it before. They weren't interested in philosophy or Indian philosophy or anything of that matter. But when they started hearing it, they burst out into tears, and they couldn't explain why. And that, I think that's what it is like, you don't have to have a rational understanding of the energy or the healing that could come through these sounds, but they reach in a deep place. When someone is singing from that deep place, from the heart, you feel it. You don't have to understand the words. The words don't really, they don't matter so much.
Amen, brother.
So
I just got
that's Bhakti
chills.
Yoga.
Yeah, no, because I feel it, man. I think that's why I love music so much too. Is like, I love it for all sorts of emotions. Like I play metal, I play regular rock and roll, I'll play like classical acoustic. Like it's all great. It all gives you a wavelength to ride for a bit. And
Mhm.
so the guy who's been through a lot has been traumatized by his experiences, hears a frequency, doesn't need to be interpreted by his brain, because it's literally hitting something in him at such a deep energetic level that
Yeah.
he just instantly, his nervous system is, overwhelmed by the influx of whatever these emotions are, these neural, this neural activity that just is awakened. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful, miraculous thing. And that's where science becomes miraculous, in my opinion, is when we can see how like music can heal, or, things like that. To me, sound healing is a beautiful way to to manifest that. I don't know if you've had any sound healers on, Bogdan. Have you?
I haven't. No. Earlier on, I was really interested in sound healing, and I'm wondering if there's what ways I can actually apply it other than like music therapies and things of that nature. But I remember really being interested in cymatics or kymatics, the
Yes,
study of like
cymatics.
how sound affects matter. And
Waves.
yeah,
Kima in Greek means waves. Kimata.
really fascinating. If you guys are into sound healing at all that are listening, look up this word cymatics, cymatics, or spelled with a K also. But basically, what some of these even YouTube videos show is if you put like a plate and then under it, like a metal plate, and under it you put a speaker that's playing a certain frequency, like it's playing 432 hertz or
The
580 or
best.
whatever. I'm not sure the
432.
numbers. Yeah, 432, baby. That's why I took my guitar too.
Right here, the
Actually,
heart.
444, but
Well,
I
444
like
is what they
bright. I like the
want us to
brightness.
tune it to,
Yeah, is it
or 440. Well, you
440
go
is 444 is
444.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you do. You
Yeah.
like that
I like the
444.
bright, it gives a little brightness to it.
Mm.
Um, but anyway, so this plate's there, there's the speaker, and it's emitting a certain frequency, and you put sand on top of it. And what's really miraculous is this frequency that's emitted through this plate, it'll arrange the sand in geometric patterns that are like circles and squares and like stars and all sorts of different shapes depending on what frequency you play through it. And you'll see it, the sand literally dance into a form. It'll dance into a pattern. And it'll stay like that as long as you play the frequency. It's not like it's just always changing when you play it. Um, but that's fascinating because it's showing that sound, frequency, vibration can actually change the organization of matter. So when we're listening to music with really loud speakers, it, it might be moving our molecules.
It
Like, because it is
absolutely
for
is.
sand, at least maybe our water molecules. Who knows? I mean,
Well, it works for water as well. It does work for water as well. That's what I was going to say, is that it's
mm,
they've studied it on water, and they see that it affects. So like if you leave a cup of water out and you're listening to classical music, the organization of the molecules of the water molecules will be much more harmonious. Just like they'll be much more distinct and like well done versus like, I don't know, rap or metal. And I mean, I like that music, but it gives it more of like a blobby. It's not as like
like
structural.
the bass sounds. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more like, it's also more like disjointed, where it's like much more. It looks like I'm trying to, like, the Fibonacci sequence, or like, those, like, those things that we find in nature that are like perfect, like the way that they form like a
Mhm.
shell, let's say, and it
Mhm.
just like flows effortlessly. That's what we'd want in our bodies for health, right? Optimal health. We want our vibrations and our cells to be one that leads to harmony versus discord, because like in a lot of ways that's what cancer is, obviously, with the cells have been, the vibration they're getting is essentially throwing them off to the point where they're producing more and more metastasized negative cells that are hurting the body. um, I'm speaking very loosely now. I'm not trying to act like I understand the nature of deep down oncology, but the idea is that this ease is because our body is not operating from ease and not, it's not being able to express itself optimally. So our cells show that with all these problems and these issues that come up.
The harmony between the organs. I mean, you could think of that as like the harmony of the spheres and the planets and how they all relate to each other. And that's how our organs relate to each other. They all function in this deep interconnected relationship that when one of them's in trouble, the other one takes over and helps it. But, if they're all in trouble, then you just have a state of disease that isn't able to overcome.
And let's tie that now back to the paths of yoga, because these paths are all here for a reason. We need each one of them. You can practice one and be better at one. And the next one that we get into, I'll say that me and Bogdan, that's probably the ones that we're has come the easiest to us in Jnana Yoga. But you asked very quickly about karma yoga and what are the ways to practice that. I don't know if I can give you a straightforward answer, because that's based on your dharma and your life, based on what you need to individually do for yourself. It can be very different. Helping an old lady across the street could be a good example, I guess, of a karma yoga act that's righteous. But based on what you need for your life, karma yoga is going to look very different. If you're a teacher versus a soldier versus a doctor versus, all these different jobs that you might have that would require different actions of you in life, fulfilling your karma. So I think that's the one that you live every day and have to figure out on your own. There's not a lot of guidance with karma yoga other than like reading the Bible or reading, a holy text that tells you this is good, this is bad. And you try to create your own moral, judgment over time, a foundation that you act from, for the most part during your days. So I think that the next one coming in here, Jnana Yoga, which is knowledge yoga, gnosis, Jnana, that's where once again, Indo-European, that's where the root of the word comes from, is from the Sanskrit, right? Jnana, gnosis, knowledge, true wisdom. So how does one go about that path? Well, that's something that I also was, wondering about, because you can read all the books that you want in the world. And we always talk about this, right? You become so theory heavy and you learn all this knowledge, but what does it really lead to? So I think Jnana Yoga, I think if you're a Hindu or even a Buddhist, I think it's based on like spiritual realization of like trying to really just understand the division between you and the world and you and others is sort of an illusion. And that's where Bhakti Yoga comes in to kind of give you that, we're all connected. We all should devote ourselves to each other. And I think Jnana Yoga is just like getting into the nitty gritty of like the rationalizations and the psychological makeup of who we are, tied more into maybe, like our view of self versus other. Because I know the main lesson for Jnana Yoga and Hinduism is to recognize Atman, your individual self or soul, as Brahman, meaning the ultimate reality. Not even necessarily God, the ultimate reality, the isness of all, the essence of all, the being of, that ties us all together, which some like to allocate a spirit to and others don't feel the necessity for. I would agree with both of them. I think the idea is, at the end of the day, scientifically, energetically, there's something that ties us all together. And Jnana Yoga is the pursuit to kind of have that realization once more. Oh my God, I'm one with everything in the universe. All these atoms, are creating me physically. But, if you believe in quantum theory, in quantum physics, they're also a part of the entire world at the same time. And it's not, this is all technically illusory, right? With Maya.
That's the fascinating thing about it, is even within the religious traditions, like Christianity, they talk about God as the great unknowable. So even when you're talking about God from within a Christian context, you're talking about something that is not necessarily directly perceivable. It's something way beyond the human mind to grasp what this is. And when you're looking at it from a more scientific perspective, it's the same way that you view reality. I mean, we exist in an amazing, possibly infinite space. There's millions and billions of suns and planets that we don't know where they really came from. Our bodies are thought to be made, the very atoms are thought to be made from the furnaces of these suns and these cataclysms that happened billions of years ago. And, the sun is just there and it's keeping us alive. We have the perfect conditions for life here on this earth. And we don't know if there's life in the universe. Like, we're so small. The reality is so unfathomably large to us. Like even the world, even the earth is so big to us, but the earth is just such a small part of the whole universe. And we don't understand that at all. I mean, probably never will, because we could barely even understand what's right in front of us. And
Exactly. And
that's
that's
that
why,
same like view of like that unknown, like that's that same rapture that happens to somebody when they look out at the sky as when they think about like God. That's the same, like, I don't know what this is, but there's something here that I don't understand. And this something is everything else. Like I'm the
exactly.
self and this is the whole reality around me, but I'm also part of the whole reality. Like I'm not separate from it. I wouldn't be here if there wasn't a sun. I wouldn't be here if there wasn't an earth. Wouldn't be here if the stars didn't die and make the atoms that became my body and transform from the earth. And it's an unfathomable mystery where life comes from. So even from a scientific perspective, you got to say like, this is mysterious, this life. And that's
Well, that's why jnana yoga is the hardest to practice, but jnana yoga is scientific. It's based, you're learning from your experiences, and you can learn from reading, or doing these crazy physics experiments that they do at the Hadron Collider and all that. You know what I mean? Like, there's no doubt they're doing some interesting work there. And I'm sure it's, teaching us about the building blocks of our reality. But I think some of these jnana yogis from the past, like you said, the earth is so unfathomable, but the earth is small compared to the universe. Some of these guys, were probably able to travel through their minds throughout all eternity. You know what I mean? Like, jnana yoga is, like you said, the unfathomable, the study of the unfathomable and the intelligible world, which we're only scratching the surface of, So I think that's the real, like, I couldn't say any better than you did, trying to, break it down with all the different things that we could think about. But that's the idea of jnana yoga, is I think knowing that you don't know is probably a good place to start with jnana yoga. And then from there, you do your exploring, you figure out what you explore the world, the physical world, and you explore your psychological world, your consciousness, and try to get to know what it is that makes up you. And then you study others, and by conversing with others, you can also learn from jnana yoga. I think the Socratic dialectic is a great method of jnana yoga, where you talk to people and you discern and you come together. And that's why your podcast is so successful, and why this forum, this medium, is so successful, because it allows people to develop their ideas. And from there you learn about yourself, which is the universe, a part of the universe, just like the trees and the sun and the stars and everything else, like you mentioned.
Yeah, in jnana yoga, it has a corresponding practice to some degree. I mean, it has many practices: the path of the philosopher, the path of wisdom, the path of the sage, the path of, reading the classical texts on philosophy, on meaning, and trying to apply them to life. But in Buddhism, there's this specific practice of vipassana, the direct insight. So it's this practice of meditation that's actually, it comes later on. So in the beginning, you just focus on the body, becoming aware of the body. Then you become aware of the breath, and you kind of train your mind to be able to be focused on something. But among the highest goals is this vipassana, which is this direct seeing, this direct perception of your own mind, your own psyche, and your own experience of something, beyond even yourself. And there's this idea too. So jnana, the same roots as, gnosis. And gnosis, it is the underpinning of knowledge, but the way we think of knowledge now is not really what gnosis is, because gnosis, as we both have read, is direct experiential wisdom. It's not like gnosis is not like, oh, I know that's a fact. Like, gnosis is, I've experienced something and I know it to be true because, like, I've experienced it. It's not like a theoretical thing. It's not even something that you can necessarily.
It's a present truth.
Exactly.
Ever present.
You can recognize it in a book, but you can't really get it from a book, because unless while you're reading the book you have the experience, the only thing that lasts is that experience. So this path of jnana yoga and insight meditation is, you bring that insight, and what happens, right? What happens when you bring like full calm attention and your mind's not scattered and there's not thoughts happening, and you just look at things within your own mind, thoughts arising? You have insights that are experiences. They're not, rationalizations of what's happening. You have a direct insight into how does my mind work? Where do the thoughts come from? Where does my suffering come from? What's the root of it? These kind of things you see directly without words. So I think jnana yoga is really the path of, the Tao, really. And it's not about accumulating knowledge, because knowledge is only as good as, what it leads to. Does it lead to an experience of the knowledge? That's the only thing that matters, right? Because you can read like a million books and you could just be, it could not change your life at all. So like, that's not jnana yoga, because yoga is about union. So what brings unions? Experience, the experience of knowledge, the experience of truth, the experience of what is, whether it's, in the universe, what you're observing, or just in your own minds, but not through a rational mechanism, not through thought.
Right. And that's the key. So now we can, but you could also use the rational mechanism of jnana yoga, in the sense that it could inform your decisions that you make for karma yoga. So, jnana yoga is reading, ancient holy texts or scientific studies, whatever it is that's going to inform you on your path as a karma yogi, which is the path that you take constantly. Not that, I mean, the other ones are definitely there constantly too, but I feel like the predominant one, like you said, why are all the myths that we read about written from the karma yoga perspective? There are elements of bhakti yoga in there. There are elements of jnana yoga, and all, when we get to the hero's journey at the end here to kind of tie it all together, that's kind of the idea, is that all of these paths coincide. But once again, the karma yoga path is like your day-to-day actions, and jnana yoga can be extremely helpful to informing those actions that you take. And that's the key.
There's this understanding that you're hinting at that I think ties it all together, is we live through all the paths, right? So jnana yoga is the path of the mind. How can we use the mind to become fulfilled, happy, wise? Everything that corresponds with that. Bhakti yoga is associated with the heart. How can we get our emotions, our feeling in order with reality, and acting in a good way to bring us peace? And then karma yoga is the path of, the solar plexus, the will, action, movement, activity, the body, the physical. What do you actually do? The practical, pragmatic. How do you bring about a good thing? And really, an integrated human has all of them functioning. They have the wisdom, they have the compassion and love, but they also have the action to go along with it. Because if you think of it, each of the different paths can be focused on to bring you to insights. But I think the only way to live a truly good integrated life at your fullest capacity is to express all of them at once in different proportions. Everyone has more of a bend. Like some people are more towards the heart side. Some people are more towards the mind side. Some people are more towards the action. You don't have to be a guru in each of the ways. You're probably going to be, a guru or master in one of the ways if you practice, but you'll be pretty dang good at the other ways, and they all work together and they all inform each other. The wisdom informs how the heart works. The heart informs how you act. They're only separatable in terms of, you're devising a mode of practice for someone to get somewhere, to get to a better place in their lives. And for some people it's better, or some time of their life, maybe they need to start with this and that. And it's kind of hard to do everything at once. So the path is delineated.
Right.
But it's not funny. A separate path. It's a path. The path is united. I mean, that's the point of yoga, right?
Exactly. And in an example, I asked my students after they read about the yogas, I asked them which yoga did they think they practiced the most, to see what they vibe with. And then I also asked them which one do they think I practiced the most, because I was interested to see what they would say. Mm-hmm. And I would say it was a fair split, the two between, I guess, karma and jnana, because a lot of them are like, jnana yoga, you're a philosophy teacher. Like, obviously that's what you're doing. But then karma yoga, they're like, but your job is a teacher and you teach. And so your jnana yoga has informed you on your karma path. So I'm like, that's cool. I'm glad that they feel that they sense that, because that means that I'm fulfilling my dharma then, if they're feeling like, oh, he's on his karma yoga path, right? There are a few bhaktis in there because they know that I love philosophy and teaching. So that, that was there. But it was definitely between those two that they felt like these are your strong suits. And I think, that's a beautiful thing to see. If that's, if you at your job, if your job is based on teaching and you're fulfilling your jnana and karma yoga, and there's bhakti a little bit in there because you're passionate, once again, like you said, I've integrated those three paths in my profession. I think that's glorious. You know, that's all we can ask for in our lives.
That brings up a really interesting insight. I think one of the reasons why we were drawn to the philosophers like Plato, Socrates, and their kind of images, and even Jesus Christ. So obviously the word philosophy, philosophia, love of wisdom. So you already got bhakti in there because there's a love, and of wisdom, you got your jnana, you got your knowledge, your gnosis. But what's most interesting about the
The
Socratic
third force, man.
philosophers,
You're gonna
yes,
do it to us.
yes, I'm going to do it. So the early philosophers, it was more like a religion. So it was about how do you apply the philosophy. So that's where you get the moral philosophers, and morals are they only make sense in terms of how do you actually act, ethics. You combine those three things together in a character like Socrates, who has the love of wisdom and the love of others, but also acts in accordance with that.
Follows
You
that
have
dharma
the
to
all
the
parts.
end.
You have
He
all
follows
three
it.
parts fulfilled in one person. And
Just
of
like
course,
Jesus.
yeah, and these people are likely historical and also mythical, because there's mythologizing that happens around great people who fulfill their paths. So there's a historical element, but it's all tied together in the perfect life, let's say.
Right. And that'll be the segue to the final thing here to tie it all together. And I think that was brilliant how you brought it up with the idea of what a philosopher is that you love the wisdom, jnana, bhakti, and then all of a sudden, well, when you do that, you are acting and doing your karma yoga. It's
the problem
brilliant.
these days is like the view of philosophy. Like I remember telling people, so we both majored in philosophy, we went to school of philosophy, if anyone doesn't know. I mean, you probably know after listening to us for a while, but like it's pretty obvious that that's what we like to talk about. But I remember telling people like that, you know, I was studying philosophy and people were like, oh, cool. Like as if I said like I was studying like statistical algebra or something. You know, like something like very abstract and very heady and very, you know,
logical.
the idea of philosophy in these days is this very academic thing. You know, they're writing papers and doing arguments. But when you look at the roots of philosophy, roots are, you know, in yogic philosophy, in Greek philosophy, Socrates, Plato. This was a way of life. This was the Stoics. It was seeking wisdom, love of wisdom, seeking it, applying it, and living a good life. That was all that philosophy mattered for in those early stages. And I think that's the key thing to bring back. But I'll let you continue. I just wanted to dispel some notions of what philosophy is, because we have very loose definitions of it, obviously.
You're right, man. And like you said, we because we learned it and we majored in it, that's for us, it's a lifestyle, and others might not realize how accessible it is. You know, it's not this ivory tower pursuit, man. It's you know, it's ever present. And that's kind of why, you know, when I taught my students this, a lot of them at the end of the year, I asked them what they got out of the class the most. And surprisingly enough, considering that it was all distance learning for Indian philosophy unit, some of them came out and said they got a lot out of that. And I was like, that's great, because I wasn't even physically there, but they still, from my lessons and my lectures, they were able to get something out of it and to learn from it and to impart it on themselves. So that was really a success for me. And it shows that we were taught well by Nicholson, you know, who gave us the good stuff and the legit teachings. We didn't learn it from like a third source through like a book, or you know, we read books, but we learned it from the teacher that really was able to put our mindset in the right angle to get the most from these books. I also do want to mention the physical aspect of yoga, because that is a part of this, and maybe it's better to look at that as an outgrowth of karma yoga, like it's just like doing your, you know, doing what's right for your body. It's also it's called Raja or Hatha yoga, and Hatha yoga is the way I like to look at it, because it's Nicholson was always big on like making a point of Hatha yoga is that it's like doing violence to the body. And it's like, whoa, why would you want to do that, man? That's not good. You're going to like, you know, hurt yourself there. But that's the idea, is like once again, we're like sweating away the impurities, right? We're trying to attain that wholeness once more from the things that stand in the way of it. And so by doing, you know, physically straining practices, hot yoga, sweating at 80 degrees, you know, doing whatever it is you got to do in order to, you know, bring yourself to physical realization, the physical heights of feats of strength and whatnot, it's important to also have that element of it in your life. You have to do right by your body. Your body is the vessel for these three paths. Without your body, without a healthy functioning body, you're not going to be as successful, having that holistic, result that you're looking for, which is, what you want to do when you're practicing yoga.
I
So
think
that's
that's a
number
key
one.
understanding of yoga, that physical
Yeah.
aspect. So I've read that the earlier views of the actual asanas and the physical aspects of yoga, they're preparations of the body for meditation. They make you
Meditation, and
limber enough
also,
and mindset enough in your body so that you can actually begin the real practice of meditation, which is just going deeper into
absolutely,
that.
absolutely, and also not just meditation, Bogdan, but sex, and that's
Mm,
important too.
that's the tantric
So,
tradition.
right, well, yeah. So that maybe I'm getting a little. Of course, I got to go off track here, get a little
Tantra yoga,
eccentric.
next episode.
It's true. I mean, you could have oh my God, you should get someone in who knows. I mean, I think you've talked about Tantra with people in some of your talks, if I'm not mistaken. I feel like it's been a part.
Not really, unfortunately. No, I'll
Really?
have to find somebody who can speak on it. I remember being interested in it um like a
It's the
couple of years ago.
non-traditional path.
Yeah.
Right, but it's very, in my opinion, it's very traditional. I mean, sex is it's become this, this taboo thing, but it's a part
Yeah.
of who we are. So the idea of practicing yoga is that you're opening up energy channels so that when you do have intercourse, it becomes this spiritual, amazing, life altering experience, which is what we're trying to have. And that's what the merging of all of these paths at the end of the day leads you to having a life altering experience every day of your life. Your life becomes meaningful, your life becomes worthwhile because you are putting your all into it, and you're inspired by everything that you do. And so that's the idea. So you're physically engaged with your life, you're mentally engaged with your life, you are devotionally engaged, your heart's in it, as they like to say, and you show up every day. I feel like karma yoga, a lot of it's showing up, like actually like putting in the effort to wake up and do what you got to do, right?
Mhm.
And so they all work together. And like you said, if you merge these together, you will be not a perfect being. You'll never be perfect, but you will be absolutely capable of overcoming whatever challenges face you in the path of life. And it's inevitable that challenges will face us, because the challenges are what make us who we are and give us that strength of character and the wisdom that we can then impart to others so that they can live their best life and, follow the various paths that ultimately lead back to you.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Let's end it here. I don't think it could get
Right?
any better than this. We'll
Yeah,
have you
no.
on the show for many more episodes. Always love talking with you, Eric. It's always a
Many
pleasure.
thanks, Bogdan. Brother Bogdan, congratulations on becoming a doctor. We always talk about how being a doctor and being a teacher are very, very much overlapping. And it's great that we can do an episode like this where it flows so effortlessly, because these paths overlap. And, we're always trying to practice them to the best of our abilities every day, day in, day out. Even if you don't even know you are trying to do that, everyone is practicing these paths. We're all
Mm,
walking this path every day of our lives, whether or
yeah.
not you're aware of it. And becoming aware of it just makes it that much more potent of a medicine that is this mindset, that is this lifestyle. Because your diet and your nutrition, right, your mind state, how well you breathe, your actions towards other people, that's all a part of your holistic health.
Hmm. And sometimes it's all just a perspective change, just a little flip in the way we view things, rather than feeling, oh, this is happening to me versus this is happening for me. Or, oh, like lately, the past week, I've been just waking up with the thought of, how can I do something good today? How can I actually help someone today? How can I do something fulfilling, rather than think of like, what do I need to get done? Because
Mm,
they're the same thing. Because when you're living that path of the Dharma yoga, where your actions actually lead to good for other people, you're a teacher, you're a healer, you're a craftsman, you do this or that, like all your actions lead to good of people. That's the whole point of any job. I mean, I don't know if there's any job that the whole point of it is to bring suffering on people. Not that I'm
unless
aware of.
if you're a weapons dealer, that's why Buddhists would say that's not a good job for karma yoga. That's one that Nicholson would bring up, man. I'm not even kidding. He'd be like, no, if you're dealing with weapons and you're a Buddhist and your actions are definitely leading to the suffering of others,
Well,
hard to
okay, so
say.
yeah, there is some career paths like selling, very addictive drugs that destroy people's lives.
That
Like
too.
your actions, actually, your karma yoga would be best to just like stop doing that. Actually, not to do it with
But
devotion, but just don't do it. Um,
that's so funny. It's so
but
true.
but yeah, so all of our paths have that that potential, depending on how we how we look at it. And you had an excellent article on community natural mental health site that I've started several months ago. It's going to become kind of the base of the clinic that I start, because I am going to be licensed as a naturopathic physician practicing in Oregon, specializing in mental health, specifically how to treat mental health naturally, anxiety, depression, different psychiatric issues, other chronic diseases, digestive issues, using herbs, using diet, lifestyle approaches, mindfulness, all these different aspects that really bring health. And that website is holisticsych.com, PSYCHE.com. You have an article on there about yoga, very in-depth article. If you guys are interested in learning more about yoga, reading about several articles on there about herbs that can help you with mental health issues. And also check out ktherbs.com. It's where my company I founded, Kintaros Therapeutics. I make herbal tinctures, healing extracts for sleep, for mood, for supporting energy, for stress, for love. We're actually working on a formula for helping people with pain. So we use all organic herbs from local farms in Oregon, put them all in a tincture, which is basically an extract. So all the medicinal components are in there, flavored with honey, delicious. We're at vendor markets in Silverton every Saturday and Sunday. So I've been selling a lot of tinctures there. A lot of people, we do like taste tests. I do like herbal tarot readings, things like that. But anyway, it's been a great path. It's part of the way that I express the love and devotion and compassion, is giving people these things that not only do I love actually making, and I always find herbalism so fascinating. I know you do as well. But actually, so that process of making them is beautiful, and the research that goes into formulating these things. But the best part is when people use it and they're like, oh, this actually really helps. And I'm like, you just can't feel any better than that.
And let me shamelessly plug this here.
Please
shamelessly promote you. Okay. Because I mean, we're friends, obviously we've known each other now, but what's great is that we're working together as we, grow in these paths in our lives, we become much more impactful, because now we're in the position to impact others' lives. We're the professionals that are practicing this stuff. Right. So your tea that you made for me, which was the stomach, just like stomach calming tea, let's say, it is, once again, it's got, it doesn't just impact what it was made to do, which is just to, calm maybe an upset stomach, maybe a little bit of heartburn. It also helps calm you physically.
Yeah.
So you put some lavender in there, you put some peppermint in there, I'm pretty sure you put chamomile in there as well.
Yeah, put chamomile
and it is
in there.
just,
and probably
this thing is
too.
magical medicine. It is. I mean, you gave me a huge bag of it and I still got it. It's like a year later and it still works just as well. It is the most brilliant,
awesome.
Powerful tea I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, I'm getting another order of herbs actually later tonight. So I'll make one for you of the fresh stuff, because I'm getting a lot of lavender and chamomile because I use those for the formulas.
Yes.
But the place I get from, they have really good chamomile and lavender. Jesus. Like even in the dried form, it's so fragrant and amazing. So part of the healing is just getting really good potency herbs. I mean, the best places, from nature, from the wild, fresh picked, fresh dried. But it can get pretty good with some of the dried stuff they make. So yeah, man, I'm glad that this has been helpful for you. I mean, I've had so much benefit from herbs. It's kind of hard to even begin with what they can help you with. So that's kind of been my focus: herbalism, mental health, spirituality, and then also using pharmaceuticals when they're needed, ordering lab tests, because naturopathic physicians here in Oregon, we have a pretty big scope of practice. We can do referrals, we can order imaging, we can do a lot of the things that primary care focused physicians do. But we also have the toolbox of using the natural approaches. That's the path that I prefer. That's where I start with. The foundations of health, like we talked about.
It's the all-encompassing path, Bogdan. You're going to be merging all these yogic paths together in your practice, especially if you got the mental health approach, and then you're going to throw in the herbs in there. That's your physical, that's your hatha yoga, that's your karma yoga is obviously your practice, and you're doing it because you love it. All of these things have tied in. Just like my students saw that I was exhibiting these different paths of yoga in me, your patients, I guarantee, and I know they already do, people who you work with, they will get the same benefits because you are merging all these paths together. And that's how we have a future right now, is if we get everyone as individuals to work together and to, help each other along these paths and to offer something to the world to make it a better place and to heal people and to make people want to live and pursue their dreams and goals. I have faith, that we will live in this renaissance. This time will become a renaissance instead of a dystopian, a world that maybe is, much more challenging than it needs to be. I think that if we put our heads together, our hearts together, our dharmic paths together, and we help each other, we're gonna be just fine in this world. And it's not that we won't have challenges in this, 21st century, but we have all the tools that we need, like you said, the tools that you need to create the world that we want for the future. And I humbly believe that, if we work together on this and your listeners, are motivated and inspired and reach out to you and you have more of these people on your show, to learn about, let's say, sound healing or, other things that we mentioned, kymatics. That's how we're going to really change the game here, is that we're going to empower each other to be whatever we need to be for ourselves and to heal and to grow and learn and everything else.
That's a good point you bring up. So if you guys want to get in contact with me, if you're interested in these natural health topics, holistic health, maybe you're a healer, you do yoga, you do massage, anything within the fields, you can find me on Instagram. So the name is Holistic Psyche, but between holistic and psyche, there's the underscore symbol, like the on the ground symbol. I don't know what it's called. I guess underscore. So Holistic Psyche, you can find me there on Instagram, send me a message, be like, hey, what's up? Saw your show. I'm interested in this and that. I want to talk about this. And I'd love to have you on because I love having conversations about this kind of thing, because not only is it interesting, but it spreads the word. It gets the message out to more people so that this form of healing can become more mainstream rather than alternative. I mean, there's no reason that, diet, lifestyle, exercise, meditation, mind approaches, spirituality, herbs, like why these things aren't the first line for a lot of these issues. They should, everything should work together based on what the person needs. So be sure to reach out. I told you about the websites. You can go back and listen to it. If not, I hope you guys subscribe to the Herbal Hour and contact me if you'd like to be on the show. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on iTunes, and we're on a lot of other podcasting mediums that I'm not aware of.
Stay healthy and whole out there, folks. You got some, we're all in this together. We're going to create a healing community. That's what we're doing. That's what's happening, even if we don't know it. So let's keep it going. I have so much faith in you and these listeners.
Eric Anderson, the man.
Just a mirror of everyone else, my friend. We're doing the best we can out here.
Thanks for being on the show and the excellent discussion, sir.
Anytime. Look forward to the next time to listen and to be on the show as your guest.